being an activist, but what do you say to your critics?
Again, you're being an activist. I am
That's not appropriate, sir.
Who are you with? What's your name?
That's not an appropriate question for you to ask. You're
going to ask how many questions? You get 3?
You're a stupid son of a bitch.
Good morning, Liberty lovers, Liberty curious, and anyone else tuning in to Friendly Fire. If you're watching live, then let me especially thank you for tuning in so early. This show is dedicated to interviewing libertarian candidates running for office and only libertarian candidates. As the name suggests, candidates will be asked some tough questions, but as a fellow libertarian, I'm not here to make them look foolish or fail. I'm simply raising the bar for interviewing candidates, as well as the expectation for candidates. The Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the United States and the only viable option to compete with the big two. In this episode, I bring on Brandon Davis, who is the Libertarian candidate for governor in Nevada. So with that, let's bring Brandon in. Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing well, DL. Thank you for having me today. This is a pleasure.
Absolutely. Can you hear the sounds of a small tyrant in the background?
I can. Absolutely. And I get it, dude. I've got 2 little ones, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. Luckily, they're outside playing with the neighbor kids right now. So
yeah, it's
all good.
It's bath time right now. And unfortunately, my office is right next to his bedroom. So not much I can do about it. But hey, that's what happens when you're Liberty Dad, right? Like you got to have some Liberty Son in there every now and then.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I got to say, and I mentioned this at the Libertarian National Convention when I ran into you, one of the things that I really appreciate, as a father myself, somebody that's out there on Twitter and on social media talking about, being a libertarian and being a dad. And I've seen that quite a bit from you. So that's what originally drew me to you and your social media presence. So it's a bond that we'll have forever.
Awesome. I try not to give too much dad advice just because I'm 3.5 years in. What do I know? I'm still trying to figure it out, right?
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, that didn't work, so let's try something else. But no, all is going well here. So, and I appreciate it. And it was great to actually meet you out in Nevada, your home state. So
yeah, no, it was a great convention. I mean, just being able to meet some of the folks and some of the training that transpired, some of the talks, the progression of how it ended. It was all very interesting, and I was glad to be there.
Awesome. Were you happy with the results of the of how the convention turned out?
I mean, for the most part, there was a couple of things that, probably didn't swing the way that I'd anticipated, but I thought overall, there was some compromise. There were some things that happened that were positive. And at the end of the day, we got things done. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's good. So let's dive right into it. So let's start with the very basic, simple, easy question. Tell us about you and why you're running.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm running to be the next governor of the state of Nevada. When I moved to Nevada about a decade ago, it really had so many things that spoke to me as a libertarian, right? Open carry laws and, fairly low taxes at the time. Nevada was just known, whether it's legalized sex work in certain counties or, some of the things back in the early days, in the gold rush days, Nevada's just always been to me a very libertarian state. And so since then, I've watched Republicans pass the largest tax increase in state history in 2015. I've watched Democrats continue to try to erode our individual liberties and freedoms time after time. And then in 2020, when our governor with one signature was able to demolish thousands of businesses and, keep our kids locked out of schools, causing, literally historical child suicide rates. I said at that point that I had to do something. I had to take a stand. I couldn't sit by any longer. And so that leads me here today. As far as me, I said it earlier, I'm a dad. I've got 2 young ones. I'm a husband. I'm the CEO of a marketing and advertising agency. And then I've got partial ownership in a couple of other businesses here in Southern Nevada. I sit as the chair of the Libertarian National Party candidate support committee. I also am the elections committee director for the Libertarian Party of Nevada. So I'm very active in politics in this state. I've testified in legislative sessions in the past, and I'm just very passionate about protecting our individual liberties, our natural rights, and making sure that this state, can be one of the greatest states in the United States to live moving forward.
After Florida, of course.
Florida's good. Florida's
We
good.
got, I got to represent my home state a little bit. Now, there's a little sibling rivalry here with New Hampshire folks, but it's all in good fun. So I guess now we're gonna have a little bit with the Nevada folk, and that's okay.
Yeah,
Sibling rivalry is always a good thing as long as at the end of the day we come together when we need to, right?
that's right.
Circle the wagons around each other, right? So that's awesome. That actually a question that so let me back up here really quickly. I'm going to be mindful of the time because we are pre-recording. So just so that everybody knows, this is a pre-recorded show. So if you're trying to put some comments in there, we will not see them. So I will not be able to ask Brandon any questions. And also because it's pre-recorded, I have an hour limit. So I'll have to make a hard stop at about an hour. But we'll try to get through everything. Quick question though, that I didn't even realize you said that you were on the candidates committee for the national party. So how has running impacted your the way that you see things? Like, were you on the committee before you ran, or did you jump on it afterward?
No, it's a fairly new thing. I mean, we started this committee. I think we're in our second or third month. So I want to say second month actually. So it's fairly new. We got together. There was a call from the LNC to ask if people wanted to get involved. And I said, hey, that's been my bag here in the state of Nevada. I was a part of, putting together the largest slate of candidates statewide for this election in Nevada in 40 years, and getting them training, getting them assets, branding, marketing, the whole thing. So that was something that I've been very passionate about. For me, I tend to land more on the side of less loud messaging and more let's win elections. In my, in the way that I feel that we should be, kind of moving. And so for me, it's always going to be about elections and getting libertarians elected. So when the opportunity arose, when they made the call, looking for folks to sit on this committee, I said, hey, I'm running a governor's campaign. What else should I do to fill my plate? Because obviously there's not enough there. And so I hopped on it, and then, here we are. So we're still, it's very infantile, but we're learning kind of a bit about what the needs are of candidates across the U.S., which that's been, super interesting. And I look forward to learning more as we go.
Awesome. That's great. One of our local candidates, he is actually now kind of taking a part in helping some of the surrounding counties get affiliated. And I made the joke. I said, well, since you're a candidate and you're, doing what you can to help get them affiliated, and you believe that, the affiliates should be there to help support candidates, that sounds to me like there's a good opportunity for you to influence how the affiliates kind of like their focus.
Yeah.
Like what are you guys, what kind of things do you need to do and say and whatnot, and that will eventually go on to help candidates as we have more and more candidates, popping up, hopefully.
Yeah. And it's cyclical. So, I mean, these affiliates are going to do better when they've got candidates out there knocking doors, canvassing, holding events, growing their base, right? That just brings more people into the fold and then helps the affiliate. So they work hand in hand, tandem.
Absolutely. So I think it's really great. I know it's a lot for candidates to do. So, but if a candidate has the time, the opportunity to maybe jump on something in the party, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. You just, got to be mindful of your own time and everything.
Yeah.
But I think it does go toward a more long-term goal. So I'm glad to see that some candidates have the opportunity to get in. And for those that don't, that's fine. No big deal. So let's go ahead. Let's go jump into the questions and that I have for you. So first question, I don't really ask this one that often, but what has your fundraising been like, and how has it impacted your ability to reach out to Nevada voters?
Yeah, I mean, we've raised the third largest in this governor race in the state of Nevada, which is great. Coming from a place where super PACs or just political action committees in general here in the state and nationally, they won't touch us, right? Because their objective is to fund a specific Republican or Democrat. So, we've seen a lot of organizations that coming into this, I expected to get a little bit of love from, and just haven't, because again, they're funneling all their money to the Republican or the Democrat. So, and it's funny because they're compromising on their principles and they're compromising on their mission. what their whole purpose of their organization is, whether it's free markets,
Mhm.
gun rights, whatever it is. I've watched all of these guys just fold. And
Right.
and I think that that's atrocious. I mean, I don't know what other word I can use, but we've had a tremendous funds raised from individual donors, right? We've got people all across the state of Nevada that have showed up to help us, which is great. And so this entire thing has been grassroots, individual person, donations, which for me, I love that, because
Right.
I think that the money side of things in politics can be incredibly dirty and gross, and
Right.
and I can't, I know it takes money to win, but at the same time, when you're taking $250,000 or these large sums of money from these gross groups, these special interest groups,
Right.
it's something that I personally couldn't feel good about.
Right. Yeah. No. Money is it's that coin that on one side you're like, yep, I need it. It really does help. But on the other side, there always is that string attached in some way.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm hopeful though that if we start really rallying around some of the technology that's available, like podcasts, for instance, we can start getting the message out, and we can do more with the little bit of money that we end up raising for our party and for the candidates as well. Excuse me, as well. So that's great. That's good to hear. I was, kind of curious, and I try not to, hammer too hard on money, because I know it's hard to raise money. And there's just, the thing, it costs a lot of money to do anything with. So even if you raise a fair amount of money, there may still be limitations on what you can actually even do with it, just because it's not enough. So,
yeah, and libertarians have come out, big. I mean, the National Party has shared out, about our campaign and what we're doing in both the print newsletters that they send out to donors, through their email, through social. So we've gotten some nice love from, the libertarians, both here in the state and nationally, which has been really great. So I'm thankful for that.
that's awesome. That is really great to hear. That's one of the biggest complaints that candidates have is, hey, I'm not getting enough love from, the local, state, or national party.
Yeah.
So what's your top issue there in Nevada?
Well, I mean, our independent polling and then other polling that we've seen, whether it's from Emerson College or, name the organization, and it's across the board. It's, it's the economy and it's inflation. That's the number one issue. I've got a poll that we just ran independently over this last week that, I mean, it's 3 times as high as the next issue, right?
Right.
That is the number one issue. And we've been talking about this entire time about we have to find ways to get money back into the pockets of hardworking Nevadans, right? And so my biggest thing is repealing taxes, and finding ways to get that money again back to Nevadans, getting rid of some of the existing taxes that allow us, for like the gas tax holiday. That's an example of one that we can't offer because of current NRS statutes. So finding ways again to get money in relief back to Nevadans is number one. And then the second is just opening the market, right? Removing restrictions and barriers in the marketplace to allow for more competition in various different industries and sectors. And what that does is obviously bring prices down, right? So finding ways to get relief to Nevadans that are struggling right now, I think, is our biggest issue.
I gotcha. And you said a moment ago, I didn't catch what you said, but there was you said the gas tax you couldn't do because of something.
Yeah. So the way that our laws work here in the state of Nevada is that, there's a law that basically prohibits, halting tax collection on fuel. Right.
Huh.
And then there's also another mechanism on top of that, an additional law that if the federal government, so, in the last year, Biden has talked about, doing, talking to states about, doing some sort of 3-month kind of thing, reducing that tax. Well, even if the Fed was to do that, there's a mechanism in our laws here in the state of Nevada that basically would pop back up to whatever, the federal level is. So there's just no way that the state of Nevada could ever, give any kind of relief on the gas tax to taxpayers and the people that live in this state. And that, I think that's something that's got to go. Gotcha.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I know in Jacksonville, we had a gas tax recently, a local gas tax that was implemented by city council. They voted for it. I went and spoke against it. and now we have an additional 6 cent gas tax for the next 30 years.
Hmm.
And they took the existing 6 cent and they expanded that for 10 years, I believe.
Okay.
So for the next 10 years, we actually got an additional 12 cents. And then after that, it'll drop down to just 6 cents. And that's supposed to pay for some billion-dollar infrastructure projects, which we all know are going to run out of money. And they pretty much said so when I asked them the question. So I was like,
Of course.
wow. Like, wow. And nobody threw a big fit. I was like, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you guys. I
Right.
did my best. So
Yeah.
that's
And once
fine.
it's implemented, it's never going to go away. It's not like, hey, we need
Right.
to fund, these roads or these bridges, or we need to
Right.
cover the cost of this, and then we'll get you sorted back to where it was. Once it's implemented, it's like it's just there forever.
Right. Well, it seems to be a lot of the infrastructure projects also seem to conveniently last a very long time.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're like, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't this have been built by now? I don't know. It seems like, a lot of people complain about the orange barrels that seem to always be present on their highways. And I realize there's a lot of traffic and all that, but at the same time, maybe we're not constructing them. Maybe we need to figure something out so they don't require so much maintenance so consistently.
Right. Yeah.
But that's another topic. We'll have to broach that one at a later point. So I was taking a look at the Nevada gubernatorial history, and it seems like the Republicans and Democrats kind of share that seat on and off. You guys are a swing state, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and it seems like that, and I know that's a more of a presidential thing, but it seems that way at least for the governor. Does it kind of fall that way with some of the other? Is it just the way things are within the different cities? Like, kind of how does kind of describe how that works if you can? I don't understand what the makeup is of Nevada that would kind of lead it. Is it just two major cities competing, or you got a lot of smaller areas that are like more red and blue cities, or exactly what do we got going on here? Do you know?
Yeah, Nevada's interesting. So, Clark County is the largest county, in the southern part of the state where Las Vegas is.
Mhm.
And it's a huge metropolitan area. I want to say 74% of the registered voters in the entire state of Nevada live in Clark County.
Okay.
So, Clark County kind of moves the needle for the most part. And of course, the second biggest is where Reno is, up in the north, up by Tahoe, that is in Washoe County. So that's the second biggest one. And both of those counties typically tend to lean, Democratic, right?
Mhm.
For the most part. And then, of course, everything else is, rural country, alfalfa farms and mountains and, different things like that. So they typically tend to be a little bit more, Republican and conservative. So, and of course, you've got the libertarians all mixed all throughout.
Right.
But yeah, and as far as governors, prior to our current governor, who's a Democrat, we did have a Republican governor. But again, he pushed forward the largest tax increase in state history.
Mhm.
And most people, mention him as a rhino, right?
Mhm.
Whatever that means. But so, yeah, I mean, nobody's safe. It doesn't matter, if there's a Republican at the head of the state or a Democrat, until we get a libertarian there, nobody is safe. Their bank accounts are not safe.
Mhm.
Their firearms and their safes are not safe. So that's why we're working as hard as possible to elect a libertarian at the head of our state and across our state. We've got 25 total candidates statewide in this election, and
Nice.
one's in a two-party race in an assembly district here in the southern part of the state. Very winnable. We've got everybody's throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, into this race to get him elected. So
Right.
he could end up being our first, or myself or one of our other candidates could end up being the first libertarian elected in the state of Nevada ever in this election. So I'm really excited to see what we do.
That's pretty awesome. I was trying to take a look at some of my numbers to see if I have the accurate numbers here. I've been kind of trying to take a look at how many candidates are in the various states and just kind of going back and forth. Let's see. And yeah, I think I had 27, I think is the number that I've got in, but I'm, the sources may not be 100% accurate. So that's fine.
Yeah. And we've got, here in the state of Nevada, we've got pretty much a super majority, right? So our governor's a Democrat, our, the Assembly and the Senate are both controlled by the Democrats currently. So we'll see what happens in this upcoming election, but it's definitely a very Democratic state at this point.
Right. Oh, take it back. I was looking at the wrong numbers. It is. I got 24, so I'm like right on the nose with you.
Cool.
And it looked like you had 14 delegates to the National Party.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, to the National Convention. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to highlight to people and just tell them, like, look, some of these states have a lot more candidates running than they had delegates. And I think that's actually a really good thing. That's kind of something we want to strive for, to have equal or more.
Right.
Because that means that you have that much more involvement with your candidates than you even do the national, the National Party, which is, as much as I like the party involvement, I think the candidates, that's where we're really going to get our momentum from.
Right. I agree.
So I got a graphic, and because I want to see what your I want to know what your vibe is for this year, since we know that it kind of goes back and forth. So let me put this graphic up on the screen here real quick. And what this is the let me see if I can't make that just a wee bit bigger. I think I can. Let's see how that looks. All right, that looks a little bit better. So this was in 2018. So you've got the incumbent Steve Sisolak. Is that right?
That's right.
All right, so Sisolak, and then you have Adam Laxalt. Is that Laxalt?
Yeah.
And they were within 4 percentage points of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look at any prior ones, so it looks like you've got some relatively close races, at least in 2018. And since we know they kind of go back and forth, what's your feeling on the vibe this year in terms of heavier Democrat support or heavier Republican support?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. So most of the polling and everything that I've seen, well, let me circle back. We've got 4 candidates in this race this year. So there's the Democrat, the Republican, myself, and Independent American Party candidate as well. So we've got, one less candidate than, we're looking at there on your screen, which is great. But most of the polling that I've seen has, the Democrat and the Republican, within 3 to 4 points of each other.
Right.
But all of these surveys and these polls have a 3 to 4 point margin of error. So that's really interesting. It's a very, very tight. I mean, it's nationally being recognized as one of the tightest, closest races, governor races in the U.S. So that's really interesting. We've seen polling for me anywhere between 3 and 7%. This one that I just got back this week has us at 7%. So that's really, really exciting. The largest that a non-Democrat or non-Republican has ever gotten in a general election in a governor's race in the state of Nevada, I think is 2.7%, 2.8%. Don't quote me on that exact number, but so we're looking at some historical stuff for us this year if it pans out the way that I think it's going to be, which is amazing because at the end of the day, that's what we want to help build the momentum with our new party executive committee and the leadership that we have. We worked really hard over the last year to kind of make some changes. There was not a lot of growth, not a lot of fundraising, not a lot of training. It was pretty much a dead scenario up until 2021. And so, we're doing some big things this year. And I'm really excited for that. But I'm not sure which way it's going to land. At the end of the day, Sisolak, we've seen what he's done over the last 3.5 years. As basically following a lockstep with Gavin Newsom in California. And then the Republican candidate, poor leadership skills when he was sheriff here in Clark County. He's come out in favor of red flag laws, so he's willing to compromise on individual liberties and rights. There's a ton of, conservatives across the state that are like, I can't in good conscience vote for this guy, so we're going Libertarian this year.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I pulled that poll up. That's the poll from 538, and they've got you guys, or not you guys, but the 2 major parties, Lombardo at 46%, Sisolak at 44.4%. So you've got actually less than 2% difference. You got 1.6% difference between the two of you. So that's great. And in the 2018 election, the Libertarian candidate was able to get 0.9. However, there were 3 candidates as well as a bunch of write-ins. And so if you were to kind of I think there's an opportunity there to grab some votes, especially if you guys are doing some new things. So that's pretty exciting. I'm going to be looking forward to checking out the results of the race. Do you think, so speaking of that, are you ready if you gain the necessary votes to be called a spoiler? Are you prepared for both the glory and the criticism?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And let's just be clear, on these polls. And that's one thing that has been really interesting on, this campaign and learning and seeing, the polling and actually having conducted some polling myself, that they're not even including us, like some of these, whether it's Emerson College or, there's only been a few polls that I've seen that actually include us. So, it's kind of hard when, the polling is asking vote for this guy or this guy. And they're like, well, what, there's no other option. And they're like, well, if you had to choose. And so the polling can kind of be deceiving.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, as far as a spoiler, or, yeah, absolutely. And I'll take all the positivity or the criticism with it. There's been, that same old mantra that, throughout this campaign where we talk to people and they're like, well, if I don't vote for this guy, this other guy's going to win. Right. And that's such a, Stockholm syndrome, just trite like mentality to have, that, that's the propaganda that perpetuates the two-party duopoly system. Right. And I had a tweet and some, campaign stuff that went out recently. It was like, I'm not worried about taking votes from these guys. That's the point. That's what I want. That's what I'm doing. And that's what we want. So absolutely bring on the criticism, bring on the positivity, bring on all of it. Because at the end of the day, this is about growth.
Yeah. And, it's funny. People will say, well, I would love to vote Libertarian, but not right now. And I'm like, okay, not now. When? Because that's the answer we always get. It's always, well, I would love to, but not right now. And I'm like, at some point, now has to be literally now, not later. Because people keep pushing, they keep kicking down the can down the road. And then they keep griping and saying, well, I don't like the candidates that we got. And I'm like, you could have voted for a Libertarian. And I realized that maybe your candidate wouldn't have won. But what you can do is send a message and say, look, I don't like you, Republican and Democrat. And so therefore, I'm giving my vote to this other guy. And yes, that means I am willing to deal with the fact that the candidate that I like the least might win. Right. Like maybe somebody's like, hey, I don't want the Republican to win. But they might have to risk it. And same with the person that doesn't want the Democrat to win. But at some point, you got to kind of put your foot down and you got to say, look, I'm going to send them a message. And let's be honest, people. I mean, it's not like you can't do recalls and all this other stuff. I mean, you have power after they get elected. You can go and scream and stomp your feet and demand that they, veto bills and all this other stuff. So it's not like people are just without, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's part of the message that the parties need to start sending is like, by the way, all is not lost if your candidate, the least candidate wins. It's okay. I mean, it's okay in a sense. I mean, you still have the power of your voice and stomping around. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been saying it this whole campaign, and probably it sounds like a broken record to a lot of people here in the state, but we cannot continue to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We know it's insanity. Right. And you're right. It does send a message. When you vote with your conscience and you say, listen, I'm going to make a choice to have integrity, have a backbone, and stand up for what is right. It's not always easy, but it's the right thing to do. And you're right. It does send a message, not only to, the establishment, but it also sends a message to, other voters in the state, for the next election that said, hey, I want to be one of those that propels the change, right? Right. We have to be the advocates or the purveyors of this change.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So, to me, I think it's absolutely awesome that we might spoil the race. And I look forward to seeing you spoil the race for one of them. And what I tell people will say, well, you don't win. And I'm like, well, half. I'm like, because I'm not a candidate, but when I vote, I don't want the Republican or the Democrat to win. So if I cause one of them to not win, if I cause it, then I've met my goal halfway. Right. Like I'm halfway there. I just need to get the other one to win, to lose as well. So what are you doing then to win over the voters from both major parties and your competing parties as well? Those who aren't going to vote for them. What's the message like for them?
Yeah, the message for voters is simple. Over 37% of the registered voters in the state are not Republicans or Democrats. So us, it's been going out and putting boots on the ground and talking to them. We've been in 12 of the 17 counties across the state. And a few of those additional counties are very, very, very small, lots of land, not a lot of population. So we've went across the state holding events, talking to folks, going into these rooms, and have worked really hard to, again, let them know that there is a voice for them, right? There's
Right.
somebody who, isn't part of the establishment, isn't backed by special interest groups, isn't getting the dark money, is going to advocate, for them. And I think that that's been really powerful. As far as Democrats, there's a large swath of Democrats that are not happy with how our current governor handled, the pandemic and COVID and all of that stuff. And also we've got an affordable housing crisis that has happened under his leadership and various other things. So it's been very easy for us to talk with them about a lot of the social issues that I'm passionate about, and I think are going to be real solutions to fix, whether it's justice issues like ending qualified immunity or civil asset forfeiture. Some of those things really resonate with them. And then on the other side, for conservatives, again, the Republican candidate is in favor of compromising on individual rights and liberties. And that's a simple one for me. It's like, listen, at the end of the day, I'm not going to compromise on your Second Amendment rights. I'm not going to compromise on your right to practice whatever religion it is you want, or all the different things. Right. So, it's been easy for us to go and have those conversations with those different groups and be able to kind of tailor our message to what's going to resonate with them best.
Gotcha. So I think you're like the third, maybe fourth governor candidate, and I know this is kind of a hot topic this year. So let's just ask him. The pandemic. So let's talk about what happened in in Nevada during the pandemic, and where you agree and what you would have done otherwise.
Yeah. So I mean, we were pretty much California.
Wow.
Businesses again shut down. Our schools completely closed. Forced mask mandates. Forced vaccination. The whole thing. I mean, it was it was not great. One man took the choice of millions of people in this state away from them. And I think that that's a human rights violation to me. I was extremely unhappy with the way that it was handled. We saw that businesses at the beginning of the pandemic were kind of already the market was moving, right? We had businesses that were changing their hours or sanitizing, doing their things differently there, or requiring masking, or shutting down dine in, or in-person services and moving to delivery. I mean, the market was maneuvering in a way that would have kept them, kept people safe and allowed them to still continue to operate their business. And, our governor just told them, nope, it's going to be my edict or nothing.
Right.
And so, of course we had, compliance, officers, going around throughout the pandemic, writing violations and tickets. And it was, it was like 1984. It was the worst.
That's intense.
And
so you would have done what?
Yeah. I mean, as far as what I would have done is, again, allowed businesses to operate, allowed people to make, choices for themselves, allowed, there's ways that we could have kept our schools open and done it safely. I would have allowed that to happen. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have choice, you don't have freedom. And if we don't have freedom, we have a big problem.
Gotcha. So no mandates from you then?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Not from the government. No.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. No, there is, there were a handful of libertarians that kind of were like, well, you've got a duty, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I think I disagree with that, but I was just curious.
You might have an individual responsibility of how you act as a human being, but the government's only responsibility is to protect us from foreign invasion and, uphold the rule of law. Right.
Right.
So anyhow.
Yeah, I think for me, and I'm not a candidate, but one of the things I wanted to see from the government was the absolute best level of transparency on what they knew and what they didn't know. And I felt like we did not get that, not even close. I felt like, they would come out and they would give us a message, and then later on they would come out and they would give us a different message. And then they would kind of hide behind this notion of, well, the science changed. And I'm like, but did it? Or do you have something else going on here? Like it didn't feel legitimate, right? It felt like they were just making it up. And I'm like, just tell us the numbers, tell us what's going on. And then, you don't have to say the horrible words of, I don't know. I get that, but that's what I would have looked for. But I didn't realize that you guys were as locked down as Nevada. As California. I guess that's what happens when you're neighbors. It just kind of, bleeds over, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. And you are correct. Even here in Florida, we saw the same thing. Businesses were already ahead of the game doing things, and they did a lot of things that people thought were great ideas, and some of them were crappy ideas, and they did it without government coercion.
Yeah.
You know, you might remember, I don't know if they did it in Nevada, but here in Florida, there were some places that put little directional arrows in the aisleways, and they wanted people to go down, you know, one way down this aisle and then up, you know, the other aisle. That way people weren't like crossing paths. Well, it was a dumb idea. And they did it, but then they kind of like one day we just walked in the grocery store and they were no longer there. Right.
Yeah.
There were other stores that had that hired companies to stand outside and monitor how many people were coming in, so they didn't have more than you know, a certain number of people in at the same time. And so there was like a line outside, and they were like, "Oh, somebody left, you can go in. Somebody left, you can go in." And so they kept a, you know, a certain threshold of people, but they did all these things. The barriers, the plastic barriers that went up and are still up. Did these things happen in Nevada as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we would go to a grocery store and you'd have to stand outside for, you know, 30 to 45 minutes, you know, waiting in a line to get in. Yeah. I mean, the barriers up in between, you know, at restaurants, you know, gas stations, I mean, the whole thing. And none of it, like, I mean, we see now none of it, you know, helped to slow the spread of the virus anyways. Right. It was all a moot point that got, you know, so, but yeah, it was that, and it was tough to watch.
Yeah, it was rough. All right, next one. This is tough. This is an even tougher question. Maybe not for you. I read your website. Abortion. Where is Nevada, and where would you like it to be?
So Nevada is a state that you know, has legalized abortion and you know, protects reproductive rights. I personally am a pro-choice you know, individual, and I'm very happy that, you know, women have the right to make choices for themselves in the state, and we'll continue to fight to make sure that stays this stays a thing. I think it's important to again, for me, and you've read the website, anything, it's always about individual choice, right? If you don't have choice, then, you know, we've got a big situation here. So so that's kind of where I land. But yeah, Nevada is a state that has legalized abortion.
Gotcha. And so were they not concerned then when Roe v. Wade kicked it out and said, all right, or I'm sorry, when the Supreme Court kicked out Roe v. Wade and said, all right, back to the states? Yeah,
I mean, you've got, you know, that's kind of been progressives' message in this thing, you know, and it's showing in polling that, you know, it's not landing with people, because for abortion to be, you know, not protected, or for anything in that scenario to be changed in the state of Nevada, it's going to take basically a rule of the people. Like it has to go through a vote, right? So it's very, very difficult to get that overturned. And so until that happens, I mean, there's no politician, there's no legislator, none of them can do anything about it, right? So it's got to be done by the people. So until that happens, you know, it's protected in the state.
Gotcha. So it wasn't a big deal in the first place. Okay, fair enough. Makes that easy, I guess. Then, you know, as a governor, you can focus on other things like, you know, pandemic and the economy and other things along that line.
Right.
So, so instead of a technical bill review, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your amendment questions here. So let me go ahead. I like my little bill review clip. So I'll play that clip. We'll bring you right back on in about 30 seconds or so.
Okay.
But I know I'll be a law someday, at least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, folks. So this is the bill review portion of the episode. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, in this case, we're not going to talk about a bill. We're going to talk, well, sort of a bill. It's the 3 amendments that are on the ballot for Nevada come November 8th during the general election. And these are amendments that everybody in the state are going to be able to vote on. We're going to discuss them. What I'd like to do during the bill review is have the candidates provide me a bill that we can talk about. It can be any bill. It can be, I would prefer it be a bill that's related to the role that they're running for. However, it's not a hard and fast rule. We just talk about any bill that they're passionate about. And I want to normalize the idea of reading bills, understanding what is going on in your state, local, or even national legislature. So let's bring Brandon back on. We're going to talk about the 3 amendments. All right, we got him back. Why did it? There we go. Make
Yeah.
this Mo bigger. All right, so let me bring up the. I got a little screenshot here, and we will bring these up just so that we'll have people that are watching will have something to look at, and then we'll discuss them. And right there, is it big enough? It is absolutely not big enough. So let's zoom that in a lot. All right. So there we go. Now this is not the full text. This would be the text that is above the text of each one of the ballot measures. What I'll try, I have the text, but it's really lengthy and very convoluted, as most of them are. Every amendment I've ever seen that's on a ballot is always complicated in like 900 words in one sentence and lots of commas and whatnot. So let's just try to go through it. The first one, equality of rights. Where we go here? I'm losing my spot here. So it's basically asking, shall the Nevada Constitution be amended by adding a specific guarantee that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by this state or any of its cities, counties, or other political subdivisions. And then what it does, it increases, it expands the groups that are included in the equality rights, the ERA. So where are you with this, Brandon? Or do you have any more description on this? Let's talk about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been a tough one. Definitely gained some, a lot of conversation here in the state, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to say, yeah, man, I want equal rights for everybody. Right. And if you don't, you're a monster.
Right.
But, where I get, kind of, and again, I'm a policy guy. So like every single word, kind of to me means something. And the thing that kind of brushes me a little bit sideways is when it gets to the, towards the end there, right? Obviously, discrimination against, sex, race, color, creed, sexual orientation, disability, all that stuff is, pretty standard. I mean, if you look at some of the ERAs that have been passed in other states around the US, they kind of include most of that. The one that makes Nevada different is where we get into the gender identity or expression side of things.
Okay.
And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. It gets a little tricky for me, because again, and as you know, in most people who know me, and even here in the state of Nevada, because we have a large, LGBTQ community that follows us and is backing our campaign. My aunt is part of that community. I grew up, around that. Like, I'm a huge, huge, huge supporter of gay rights. I'm very proud that Nevada is a state that, legalized gay marriage. I think that discrimination based on, that is wrong and should, they should be protected from that. However, the gender identity or expression, that those words can get kind of tricky and convoluted. And so it's for those reasons that I won't be supporting this amendment. I would love to see that amendment without those words in it. Because again, I think it opens up too many things that can get a little squirrely. So that's kind of where I land on that question.
Gotcha. Here in Jacksonville years ago, I think it was maybe 2017, something like that. We had an expansion of what we called the HRO, Human Rights Ordinance, and it basically was the same thing. It had all the standard items that you would normally expect in a human rights ordinance or an ERA, equal rights amendment, which was like race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, national origin. And then it went to include gender. I think it just said gender identity. I don't think at that time it actually said expression. I don't think it added that language. And the problem that I had with it, and I'd like to know if that's kind of being promoted over in Nevada, is that we were told that Jacksonville was having trouble getting in new companies because we had not expanded our human rights ordinance. So they were like, people were literally saying companies will not come here. They've been saying, behind closed doors. And I'm like, well, which ones? And somebody tried to say that Amazon was one of them. And I did some research. I could not find definitively where Amazon said anywhere that they would not come to Jacksonville because of the human rights ordinance not yet being expanded. But what I did find was in a neighboring county, maybe a couple counties away, that Amazon had went and established a warehouse there a year prior to them expanding their human rights ordinance. So I was like, Well, now I don't believe you. I said, because now I can't find any evidence. You haven't provided any. And I'm finding evidence that kind of suggests to the contrary.
Yeah.
Just because they didn't, I mean, Amazon could have obviously changed their policy after setting up a shop. Who knows? So it's not a guarantee. But are you seeing anything like that, or are people just making the argument it needs to be there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't heard one thing I heard a conversation, recently from one of the heads of this, the people who are supporting this question and going around the state doing so. Yeah, and it's not anything, economic. There's no, basis behind that. It's literally just, it's the equal rights. We should pass it. I mean, it's like it's
Right.
it's pretty lazy, to be honest, but there hasn't been a ton of talk. And of course, you've got conservatives on the other side that, again, are arguing, various other things. They're worried about, the religious aspect of things. And, again, just for me, I think we get into murky waters when we, get into, again, the identity and the expression side of things. But yeah,
Gotcha.
there's been no talk of economic anything.
Okay, gotcha. Let's move on to the next one then. So we've got question 2. This one is the minimum wage amendment. So I'm going to try to get this right. It's a very lengthy one. I'm going to try to just kind of narrow it down so we don't have to read this whole thing and try to keep it in everybody's head, especially since this will be airing at 7:30 in the morning. So what it does is it takes the state's minimum wage that employers must pay to certain employees up to a rate of $12 an hour from $11. If it's passed, then I believe the minimum wage goes up to $12. But if it's not passed, I believe what happens is that for certain groups it stays at 11, other groups it goes to 12, something like that. It's like a split. Do I get that right?
Yeah, for the most part. So right now, there's already a state law that legislation that basically set, in yearly increments to increase our minimum wage. What this does is it puts it in the Constitution at a minimum of 12, right? So it can never go less than that. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's got, wide support from a lot of people in the state. We've seen in years past that it hasn't been hard to raise the minimum wage, legislatively in this state. So yeah, I'm not in favor of it. I'm never in favor of, minimum wages requirements by the state, by rent controls, things of that sort. Because we just see it hurts the market, it hurts businesses, and this is coming from somebody that owns multiple businesses that pays their employees, way more than this, and
Right.
that's because I choose to as a good owner and a good leader. But yeah, I'm never going to be in favor. We've seen too many documented cases of how minimum wage laws hurt more than they do good.
Right. Same here. I'm not a business owner, but I oppose it all the time. And I say that the minimum wage should be 0, at least as far as established by the state. However, if industries kind of wanted to push and say, like, we're going to give good ratings to these businesses that establish a minimum wage of this, I'd probably be okay with that as long as it was a completely free market matter. All right, let's save the best for last. Also is number 3, top 5 ranked choice voting initiative. And so this one is just, should the Nevada Constitution be amended to allow all Nevada voters the right to participate in open primary elections to choose candidates for the general elections, in which all voters then may rank them, those candidates by preference. And this will apply to senators, U.S. representatives, Congress, governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, state treasurer, state controller, attorney general, and state legislature. So basically state level and Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you on this one?
Yeah, I've supported it from the beginning, and I'm kind of a man on an island when it comes to both my political party and the other governor candidates in my race. I'm the only governor candidate that supports this thing. I've been in contact with the organizers of this ballot initiative from the very beginning. Again, I'll come back to it. More choice, for me in all things. So, yeah, I'm in favor of this ballot initiative, and we've been helping, kind of spread the word about it throughout our campaign.
So if I understand this correctly, what happens, and I kind of get the gist of ranked choice voting, but this also opens up the primaries as well. So it's more than just ranked choice. It's actually ranked choice and open primary, right?
Right. So currently we have a closed primary system. The Republican Party and the Democrat Party, they've got, primaries that they do in the month of June that the taxpayers all pay for, regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican, might I add. And then, of course, the Libertarian Party and all other parties hold their convention and push their candidates through that way.
Right. So one of the things that, and I'm going to bring us back because I don't think we need this up anymore. One of the things, as far as the open primary is concerned, that I often wonder about is whether or not there could be a situation where people that aren't libertarian kind of flock and vote for a libertarian that the libertarians might not want. And I think it's a greater challenge for a smaller party than it is the bigger two. So the Republicans, the Democrats, it could happen, right? Like you could have a lot of Democrats that are voting and swing, if you will, the vote to a particular Republican, even if that's not the one that Republicans prefer. But I think it's a little, in my mind, it's a little bit harder, but it wouldn't be nearly as hard if we're talking like, say, libertarian candidates or the American Independent Party. So how do we allay the fears of people that libertarians might get a candidate that they don't even want?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that from some of the people here in the state, and I just keep coming back to the same thing that we're in a situation right now where barely maintaining 1% of the registered voters in the state, have no elected libertarian in the state, and have a lot of work to do. The last thing that I'm worried about right now is like just somebody showing up to run as a libertarian that the party doesn't like, right? For me, I mean, again, that's always possible, but it's so difficult for us to field candidates in the first place. That I can't imagine, that being just this overwhelming issue. Maybe one or two, you might have that issue, but again, I don't, based on what I've seen, and I've been around elections here in 2018, 2020, and now, here in 2022, I just don't see it. Again, it's one of those things that, well, what if? It's like, well, right. What if we also had, 10% of the registered voters in the state, but we don't, right? We struggle for one in maintaining ballot access. And, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I land with that. And that's been my argument there.
Okay. Yeah. Just, cross that bridge when we get to it. All right. So we're getting close to our time. What have we not talked about that you need to get out there and let people know as far as why they should be voting for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got any, people, any viewers that are in the state of Nevada, which I hope you do, and hopefully we'll get you some more after this podcast. But yeah, I mean, early voting started yesterday, so I would highly encourage everybody to get out and make their voices heard. One of the learning in our get out the vote, stuff that in past years that the libertarians are one of the smallest numbers of people that turn out to actually vote. And so, we talked about this earlier. One of the biggest ways that we can affect change and we can make things happen in the state is by actually using our voice, right? And using our vote. So get out there and vote for me, vote for our other libertarian candidates across the state. If you can't, vote, then, contribute in some way. If you've got some viewers that want to help support us, they can always do so at electbrandondavis.com. It's been sliding across that screen the whole day. So all the help and support to get us past the past election day is greatly appreciated.
All right. Awesome. Well, check him out, electbrandondavis.com. You can find all the links to his social media and links to everything else. You can find out about the issues and other things that he is about. So go ahead and check that out. And I'm going to get to my closing. Stick around for just a moment. But that's going to be all for the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I want you to tune in again as I bring on more candidates and I talk more about our about the numbers that we have of candidates that are running and compare that to the number of people that that each state sent to their to the national party. I think we've got some good stuff coming up. And otherwise, you can find other episodes at libertydad.com, archived video episodes on youtube.libertydad.com. You can also connect with me at LibertyDad on Facebook, LibertyDadPod on Twitter, or email to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. Totally love to hear from you. Remember, If you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next